Welcome to the Future is Borderless podcast with David Nilssen. We feature top entrepreneurs and thought leaders from around the world, those who bring a global mindset and a unique perspective to their life and business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Nilssen, the host of the show. My belief is that we're living through a fundamental transformation in the way that we work and live. And this requires a borderless mindset, looking beyond the way that we think and the way that we learn and allowing us to lead and grow in a dynamically changing world. The Future is Borderless highlights thought leaders and entrepreneurs, people from around the world who bring a global mindset and a unique perspective on life and business. Now, today I have with me Chad Franzen here from Rise 25, who's done thousands of interviews with successful entrepreneurs, investors, and CEOs. And we've actually flipped the script today. So he'll be actually interviewing me. So Chad, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much, David. I appreciate you allowing me to be here. Before we get started, I'll let everybody know that this episode is brought to you by Doxa Talent, which helps entrepreneurs and business leaders establish and scale high-performing global teams. To learn more about how Doxa Talent can help you leverage borderless talent, go to doxatalent.com. Hey, David, thanks so much for having me. As we get started here, why don't you just tell me how you got started?
How I got started with Doxa?
With your career.
With my career. Yeah, it's funny. Like everybody, I think I was doing the normal things that anyone would do, going to school, starting in college, and then, getting prepared to figure out what they want to do with life. And I was given a really interesting opportunity to get involved with the stock market through trading back in the 90s. And so I think through that experience, I developed a really strong fascination with business, with numbers, with investing. And that sort of led me down a variety of different paths to starting a company like Guidant Financial, which helps new entrepreneurs get capital to start or buy a business. And then eventually Doxa Talent, which came as, through my experiences with Guidant.
Sure. So tell me a little bit more about Doxa Talent and how it got started.
Well, it's funny. Seattle, which is where it was based out of, or I should say Guidant Financial was based out of, is its own unique economic animal. The things that we worry about today, which are, access to talent, cost of wages, the complexity with business, those are all things that were happening in Seattle years and years ago. So I remember there was this time where we were preparing for a meeting, and I was looking at the numbers and realizing our labor costs were outpacing our growth. And we were still a pretty fast-growing organization. And as we were sort of looking through those numbers even further, we're noticing not only were the labor costs growing faster than our actual revenue, but we were seeing that the cost of benefits were on the rise. And then, of course, the cost of real estate was getting more and more expensive. And so we had to look at other ways of delivering the services that we provide. Now, the obvious answer is always, automate. But the challenge with automation is that it can take years and in some cases, millions of dollars to implement. And it takes a long time until you can actually recognize the benefits of that. And we needed instant gratification. So we looked at everything from outsourcing to bringing on more contract workers, you name it. And eventually we ended up establishing teams in both the Philippines and Vietnam. I won't bore you with all the details, but we learned a lot in that process. And in doing so, realized that this is a capability that we believe that most businesses are going to have to develop to remain competitive in the future. And so when we say the future is borderless, it's not just a mindset, but it is also about recognizing that we are all connected. And I think if there's anything the pandemic showed us is that we are all very connected, much more than we originally thought. And that this is something that people are going to have to embrace long-term. So we launched Doxa 7 as a way to sort of help people establish and build their own high-performing global teams because we do believe it is important.
Was there some kind of aha moment that led to Doxa 7?
I don't know if it was an aha moment, but I think, the idea of leveraging global talent is interesting. I think many people have been thinking about this. In fact, I saw a survey months ago, I believe it was Clutch, that had done the survey, and it said that 70+% of the entrepreneurs or executives that they had interviewed were already thinking about this, which is a good thing. For me, though, it didn't really didn't come to life until I actually physically got on a plane and I flew out to India. I spent some time in Kazakhstan. I went to Vietnam and spent some time in the Philippines. And I remember walking in, a good friend of mine, an entrepreneur that I truly respect, had an engineering team and product team of like 60 people in Vietnam. And he invited me out there to just come and see. Philosophically, I'm aligned with that. Actually, one of the principles in our business is go and see. It's really understand it at the root. And that's for problem solving, also business decisions. So we went and saw in Vietnam, and the moment I was there, the light bulb flipped on and I could see, we can do this. We were already managing some relationships remotely. Like I was in Seattle, but we had people in Florida. And I thought, well, what's the difference of me managing somebody in Florida or another 3,000 or 4,000 miles away in the opposite direction, assuming that we work in time zones where, we can collaborate. So I think for me, it was that moment where I realized, we can do this. And this is something I have to figure out.
So we kind of talked about how you got started in your career. What were the early days of your career like?
Well, it's funny. I go back to one of the businesses that I was part of co-founding with my best friend and business partner, Jeremy Ames, is Guidant Financial. And, as I said, we help people find capital to start or buy a business. And then we provide them with services like 401k administration, tax and accounting, and even payroll. When we started that business, like many people, it was literally started on the back of a napkin. In fact, I even have a snapshot somewhere of that napkin. We launched this business, and I was relatively young at the time. I was 25 years old, and so I was not only young, but I was young in my career, and we were sort of figuring out things as we go, as we created this sort of new category. Even, I think for me that was a big opportunity to sort of stretch and grow. But what I think I realized is that it's okay not to know all of the answers. I think that humility that I brought every single day just kind of turned me into a lifelong learner. And the other is that, I had to unlearn some of the things that I had learned in my childhood in order to be successful or get the things that I wanted as I went forward in life. And so for me, I think that was a really cool experience, and one that, I spent 20 years helping to build that business.
So moving forward from that, what would you say were the biggest turning points of your career up until now?
Great question. One that comes to mind immediately is 2008. So, I was in a financially oriented business, right? And 2008, the stock market had eroded, and that was right after the real estate market had crashed. And people stopped wanting to take big risks. And so the investments in business, which we relied on, weren't happening. And we saw our revenues over about a quarter period of time go down by about 60%. The number of transactions had dropped even further. And so for me, that was a scary time. And I think my optimism almost killed that business, because I didn't want to let go of anybody. I didn't want to reduce wages. I didn't want to make the hard decisions I needed to in order to preserve the core business. And so unfortunately, it put us in a position where we had to make or do 3 rounds of layoffs over 60 days. And we went from 110 people to 30. And that by itself was brutal. You were telling people that they were going to be losing their job in an environment where you knew that it was unlikely they were going to go get a job. And I remember even crying with some of my team members as we were saying goodbye. I remember at that moment thinking to myself, I would never allow myself to be put in that position again. And so you fast forward to 2020, and I remember being in a hotel room when I heard about this outbreak in Wuhan, China. And the pandemic was, sort of in its early phases. And I remember talking to my business partner saying, if it's in China, it's likely already here. And so we built a pretty aggressive plan to take action right away. The goal was to preserve jobs, because I never wanted to lay off a person in that environment again. And I'm proud to say that we were able to make it through that experience, having no one lost their job, no compensation was lost as a result of that. Because of the plan that we put in place and how aggressively we moved. So I learned a lot from that first experience, and that has helped, I think, me be a better entrepreneur when it comes to crisis management.
Great. So what about turning points at Doxa? What would you say are some of those?
Yeah. Well, I think when you first sign your first customer, originally when you start a business, you're generally your first customer. And that was true in this case. When you sign your first customer, you realize either how buttoned up your process and systems are, or how much they are not. The good news is we did a lot of testing. I think at that point, it gave us a lot of confidence to start to aggressively invest in scaling up the business. And we've grown very, very quickly. The one, though, that comes to mind that I'm really excited about is, when you look at offshore talent, most people think about that as virtual assistants. And I would oversimplify that by saying, hey, I want to find generalist talent that I can just send, random tasks to take them off my plate. The reality is, I think that realization for us was that there is actually more value to be gleaned the further you move up in the value chain. So as opposed to just virtual assistants, we also provide accountants, attorneys, project managers, program managers, sales development reps. And we realized, the more that we help people think about these competencies in different geographies, the more value we can deliver. But there is one innovation that we recently took on that I think is really key, because I do believe the VA program in itself is really an exciting one to give business leaders, thought leaders, managers some additional leverage. We have on our team, one of our co-founders used to be the deputy chief of staff for the head of the Ways and Means Committee in DC. So she spent 4 years on the Hill, really learning what it's like to be a great assistant, assistant to an executive in a high pressure environment. And she's developed a system not only to identify, but to onboard and train and then deploy virtual assistants from around the world into companies to help executives get the most out of their time. And I think that is something unique that we do that I've not seen from anybody else, and I'm really excited to share with other businesses.
So we talked about some of the turning points. Are there some like milestones within the life of the journey of the company that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if there's any milestones that I come to mind. I mean, obviously, when we first hit our first 100 team members working with businesses, that was exciting. It was exciting when we saw that we could support franchisors and accounting firms and SaaS businesses, right? So every time we sort of dip into new industries or new types of service sectors, that's exciting. I think the things that I'm really proud of are the fact that our turnover has been less than 10% since the day we started, which says that we're doing a good job of finding good talent who's well matched for the role that they're providing or the service that they're going to be filling. And that we're providing them with the right compensation and wages and cultural environment. But it also says that we're doing a good job of selecting the right clients. One thing that I'll say that's really important for us is that I didn't want to be a business where people went to go find cheap labor. Our job is not to eliminate jobs here in the US to move them offshore. And our job is not to find the cheapest talent. Our job is to find great, high-performing professionals and pay them what they're worth in the geography they live. And I think as a result of us doing that well and finding great clients who believe what we believe, we've seen great success.
So I'm excited to talk to you about your podcast, but first I love to give people the opportunity to acknowledge other people who have been particularly influential for their career. Who are some of your mentors or a mentor, and maybe their best piece of advice for you?
Great. There's a few people that come to mind instantly. The first is a gentleman named Lex Sisney. Lex started a company called Organizational Physics. He since exited, and they wrote books like Organizational Physics and Design to Scale. I love the way he thinks about using the concepts of science to grow a business. And one of those in particular that I love is the idea that our job as a leader is to reduce entropy first, or the stress within your system or your business, because it steals your resources. So many of us are always chasing the new, exciting, shiny new little toy while our resources are bleeding behind the scenes because we haven't adequately fixed the system or put people in the right seats. And so he's really great about thinking about where are those drains and how to attack those. That was really, I think, a game changer for me, because I'm admittingly the shiny new toy entrepreneur. The other person that comes to mind is a gentleman named Stephen Roche. Stephen today serves as the CEO of Walton Enterprises. So he's, overseeing a pretty large family office. But he, one of the things he told me early on in my career is that I had the power to lift up a city or bring it to its knees. That's actually an exact quote that he wrote.
Wow.
And I think what that said is that I had to be really mindful of my energy. I have the ability to inject positivity or infect an environment. And so that is something that I'm very, very careful of, is that, I'm bringing that sense of positivity every single day, and not allowing some of those random emotions to influence the people around me.
Okay, great. So about your podcast, why are you starting it?
Yeah, obviously I'm in the global talent business. And so this concept of being borderless is important, but I think being borderless is so much more than just talent. I said this as we were starting the podcast. I think we're really in this time where, everything that we've known about how we work and how we live is shifting. And that's not just related to the pandemic, but new technologies and just new understandings. So I think in order for people to thrive going forward, we have to sort of take on this borderless mindset, and we can learn that from understanding best practices and new way of thinking and approaching our work and our life by studying people that are doing it in unique areas. And so I wanted to bring world-class entrepreneurs and thought leaders to the podcast to sort of help share those insights on how we need to adapt or change in a dynamic environment.
Who do you think would be particularly interested in listening?
Well, I think it's anybody who owns or operates a business first and foremost. I think this is really going to be specifically geared towards those business leaders and thought leaders who are trying to worry about how do I continue to evolve both personally and professionally in this environment to get the best out of me and my team and my business. And so I think that's the person that's going to want to listen.
Okay. Anything else we need to know about Doxa or about the podcast moving forward?
No, I hope people will tune in and listen. We're going to just have raw and uncensored conversations around lots of different interesting topics around this concept of being borderless, both in terms of geography and mindset. And I think people will find it really interesting.
Okay, well, I will look forward to it. Thank you so much, David. I appreciate you allowing me to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
So long, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Future is Borderless podcast with David Nilssen. Be sure to click subscribe to future episodes so you can hear from more top entrepreneurs and thought leaders. And we'll see you again next time.